How a Romance Novel Saved the Galaxy by Ariana de Rote. Chapter 78, Adigalia 2. Adi found herself looking at the Senate with new eyes since the revelation that it was somehow working towards destroying the Jedi piece by piece. The Shadows were investigating how this had ever happened, but she felt unsettled. She was the Senate liaison on the council, so she had to visit the Senate more often than most other Jedi, and while she was sanguine about it when at the temple, actually approaching the place, Master Yoda accompanying her, was making her uneasy. However, they had no choice. They had been summoned once reports about the events on Concordia reached the Senate. Chancellor Karame's Kaj was a Togruta who towered over her opposition both in the courts where she had made her name and in the Senate where she now ruled. Her term was new, and she was expected to remain in power for at least a few more terms, after wrestling it away from the rather weak-willed Skar Kalpana before her. She was known to confront problems head-on, which explained why she had summoned the Jedi directly to her office.
"Greetings, Master Jedi. Please partake of a refreshment, if you wish." She gestured at a side table laden with various snacks and drinks, from a self-warming carafe of caf to ice-cold juice from Rimbar. Both Adi and Yoda declined the offer. Adi thought Kaj's piercing stare would have been unnerving to a non-Jedi, but she and Yoda were unmoved. "It has been suggested to me that the Jedi exceeded their mandate on this mission," said Chancellor Kaj with all the careful deliberation of a politician.
"Rescue the Mandalorian children, Master content," said Yoda.
"There were several other Jedi there, though."
She didn't seem pleased.
"On other missions they were," said Yoda.
"It was the will of the Force that they were available to aid in the rescue of the children," said Adi solemnly,
burying her amusement deep inside. She'd read the Jedi net. She knew for a fact that after the children were rescued, several of the Jedi there had kept fighting. But Dooku and Mace's report hadn't mentioned it, and Plo had stayed with the children the whole time.
"There are so few Jedi in the galaxy. Surely so many didn't need to risk themselves for a mission that should have required only 2.
Adi had to wonder who had been badgering the Chancellor so much about this.
"Well, we are stretched thin, Chancellor,"
admitted Adi, doing her best to push down her resentment of the fact that this was the Senate's fault.
"You cannot expect the Jedi to ignore other Jedi who are in need of support. It's entirely possible they would have failed to rescue the children if only the Jedi had participated."
"Mandalore, not part of the Republic. It is," interjected Yoda. "Care what happens there, the Senate should not."
The Chancellor sighed.
"There are some who always keep an eye on Mandalore. Many remember their former enmity against the Republic, and there has also been a bill to bring them into the Republic being bandied about for decades now. It never makes it off the committee floor, but the Mandalorian sector does have the galaxy's only Beskar minds."
Unspoken was the idea that money was behind the push to control Mandalore.
"Our actions on Concordia were in an abandoned mine. No Beskar was harmed,"
said Adi, pretending to take it as a literal complaint.
"It seems to have harmed some investments by the Galactic Banking Clan, judging by the protests," said Kaj wryly. She regarded them carefully with sharp eyes. "And how is it that the entire new Mandalorian government seems to have collapsed while so many Jedi were on the planet?"
Adi raised an eyebrow. That was a more blatant accusation than she'd expected. Was it just the Galactic Banking Clan that was upset, or were more senators involved? She made a mental note to notify Terra and see if she could get some info of her own before she headed back to the temple.
"Masters Kun and Fett off planet, they were. The rest not there yet, or on another part of the planet."
"From what we hear, the new Mandalorians imploded on their own," said Adi. "Their leader tried to kill a noble who was trying to bring legal action to bear against his rule. Master Kun's report states that if he had been patient, Governor Almec would still have been in power for quite some time during the legal proceedings. It's hardly the Jedi's fault that he had corrupted so much of his government and brought them down with him." "The plans to bring Mandalore into the Republic rested on Almec's government. Several senators are dismayed at this development,"
explained the Chancellor.
Could you provide the senators' names so we may address their concerns?" asked Addy. "The members of that committee are a matter of public record," said the Chancellor. That was a careful evasion. Addy wondered how many non-committee member senators had also interfered. "And what are the Order's plans now for Mandalore? Surely it is time for the many Jedi there to head home." "Mustafa noticed while she was there the Mandalore is in need of Agricor intervention, and the Council has concurred," explained Addy. "Agricor shouldn't get involved with Mandalore." There was a hint of menace to the words. No doubt the Chancellor was scared of the Mandalorians recovering from the Republic's attempted genocide several hundred years ago. Or perhaps she was worried about whichever senators had been complaining about Jedi interference on Mandalore.
"Go where they really have best. Agricor does. Not in charge of them, the Council is."
Yoda was staring unblinkingly at the Chancellor. He was telling the technical truth in that all the Corps were under the Council of Reassignment, not the main Jedi Council, but he was also ignoring the fact that the Jedi Council has been approving Agricor's projects since the recent Reformation. Chancellor Kaj let out a sigh. "The Jedi should be well aware of what happens when Mandalore prospers." "It has been 1,000 years since that happened," said Addy. She was referring to the Jedi-Mandalorian War before the Jedi-Sith War and not the Mandalorian Wars nearly 3,000 years before. "The Republic has a long memory," warned Kaj. "So do the Jedi, Chancellor," said Addy. "We have not forgotten that our protest at the Mandalorian excision was ignored. Despite this, we feel it's our duty as members of the Republic to aid in Mandalore's recovery. A reparation, if you will." Kaj shook her head. "This is going to make the Jedi some enemies."
"If against helping people they are friends they could never be,"
said Yoda. His statement was not very conducive to the Council's goal of getting some of the Senate on their side, so the Jedi could disengage, but Addy was glad he said it. Some things shouldn't be compromised, just to make life easier. They were excused soon after. Addy bid Yoda farewell and mentally prepared herself for venturing further into the Senate. Her Aunt Mirla was currently a high-level bureaucrat, though her title changed so often Addy had a hard time keeping up. Her office was always in the same corridor, at least. She claimed to want to watch the sunset. "My dear Addy!" she exclaimed once the secretary had let her inside. Addy was hugged tightly before being deposited on one of the couches to the side of the room, her aunt crowding close. "How's Stas? All I got was a call saying she was busy." Stas Ali was her aunt's daughter and was currently a senior Padawan. It was frowned on for initiates to remain in contact with their families, since it interfered with their integration with the Jedi, but sometimes masters granted their Padawans permission to keep in touch if their family wanted to, and knights and masters were free to do as they wished regarding their birth families. Being high-ranking diplomats and bureaucrats stationed on Coruscant, who regularly turned up Force-sensitive children, the Ali family often had contact with their Jedi members. "As far as I know, she's fine. Master Tiklos and her are just off on a complicated mission. Mirla's there." "Auntie," warned Annie, and Mirla pouted. "You know I have high enough clearance to just check the submitted mission files." "And that's fine after the mission is over. Until then, it might put her in danger." Her aunt knew this perfectly well, but to be a politician on Coruscant was to deal in information. Aunt Mirla was always trying to get some extra info that might give her an advantage over another bureaucrat, but she usually left her Jedi relatives alone. Aunt Mirla straightened and looked Addy in the eye. "I would never endanger my daughter." "I know, Auntie, but the Senate would have given the chance and had probably already done so, considering Madame New's report. Addy did have to give her something in exchange for the data she was requesting, though. I can give you the reports from the latest Jedi mission to Concordia, if you like. That way you don't have to put in an official request."
Auntie's eyes gleamed.
"That would be lovely." She then proceeded to start in on all the family gossip, which Addy dutifully listened to, even though she had only met a handful of her relatives who lived on Coruscant. "Oh, do listen to me, go on. Was there something you needed here, dear? I know you don't usually have time to just stop by." "I'd like to know the names of the members of the committee for the bringing Mandalore into the Republic, and if possible, the non-members of the committee who are also involved." "That's been a very busy committee these past few days," mused Auntie. "Mandalore seems to be in some sort of upheaval." She was already typing queries on her pad.
Addie pulled out her data chip so they could do an exchange. "That's one way of putting it," said Addie with some humor. "Once I'm authorized to tell you, Auntie, I will. I'll hold you to that, my dear." She held out the pad to Addie, who plugged in her data chip. Addie transferred the files, and after a moment's hesitation, the Mandalorian's dilemma, in return to the files her aunt had designated. She handed back the pad. Her aunt raised her eyebrow when she saw it. "Just some light reading, Auntie." Addie couldn't help but smile. "It's an accurate picture of Jedi-Mandalorian relations." "If you say so, Addie, dear,"